Oh, there we go. Hi and welcome everyone. I'm Alison from the Southern Cross Postgraduate Association. Welcome again for our second workshop with Nicole on for coursework students this morning, writing an excellent report. So I'll pop a couple of pieces of information in the chat box for you. I encourage you to become a member of the Postgraduate Association. And also I'll post the link to our YouTube channel where the recording goes. So we've still got people popping in, which is great. Well, that's enough from me. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. Welcome everybody. Yes, so some of you might have we might have met already in the previous workshop on essay writing, but today we're looking at writing reports. I'd love to start with your expectations again, like we did last time. It's sometimes a bit difficult for me to gauge what it is that you're interested in knowing. Some of these topics are very broad, and if I can get an idea of what you guys are looking for or what you need help with, then I can try and focus on that a little bit more. So I'll just give you a minute. If you want to share, you're welcome to do so, or if you want to just post in the chat what your expectations for the workshop and maybe what you'd like to focus on. Anybody? Does anybody want to share anything? Yeah. Hi, Fiona.
Hi.
You're welcome to go ahead if you want to share something or say something.
No, I'm in over 20 years now since my first degree, and so I thought I'd, exceptionally nervous, and I was still driving to the uni to drop assignments in a box.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to join in and just to see what's happening. So
Yeah.
just an update.
Sure. Anybody else? Yeah, so I'm hoping I can refresh your memory. And yeah, I don't think your situation is unique. We've got a lot of students joining after a period of time, and they just want to refresh their skills. And yeah, a lot of things have changed. Yeah, so I'm hoping I can do that for you. Right, so today we're going to look at different report types, the common features you'll find in any report, the common rules for structuring a report, which is a bit different from an essay, and then maybe the common issues with report writing, so the sections that students normally struggle with, which is writing an abstract and that difference between the discussion section and the results section, which can trip some students up a little bit. All right, we'll also look at writing recommendations. And then you need to also remember, guys, that reports can differ a lot depending on your assessment brief, so what they ask you to do. So it's still very important, like we did with the essay, it's still very important to analyze your well, you won't have a topic necessarily, but to analyze that assessment brief in detail and make sure you understand exactly what type of report you need to write and what exactly you need to focus on, because oftentimes they will stipulate that very clearly in your assessment brief. Okay, so there are three main report types. We have our research report, which is a scientific report. We'll go into more detail with each of these in just a moment, but I thought I'd give you a quick overview. So a scientific report where you do some sort of experiment or study that you then report on. Then you've got research by reading reports. So you basically do research by reading other people's report or other sources, good sources of information. And then you have an evaluative report where you need to critique something or ultimately evaluate something. And that might be a combination between maybe an observation or an interview and some other literature as well. Right, so let's take a look. Like I said, your research report is usually a project that you undertake, some sort of research project that you do. So you gather information in some way, or you gather data in some way. That might be through interviews, or it might be through questionnaires, might be an experiment that you do. So you gather data in some way, or sometimes they provide the data depending on the level of study. They might provide you with some data and ask you to write a report on it. So the structure for this one is a little bit different from the other two. The other two basically will have your introduction, body, and conclusion, whereas your research report has a couple of other sections in between. So you'll still have your introduction, then you'll have a literature review, a method section, results, discussion of the results, and then your conclusion and conclusions at the end. So basically what you do with a scientific report is your introduction will obviously introduce your topic. With a literature review, you're going to review the literature that is already available, so the research that's already available in the field. And the point of the lit review is to basically show where the gaps are. So basically what you're saying is, I want to do research on this thing. I need to do research on it because there is a gap in the literature, and you show that gap with your literature review. Your method and your methodology or your procedure explains to the reader exactly how you did the research. So it needs to be detailed enough, that section needs to be detailed enough for somebody else to actually replicate your study. So somebody should be able to read your method and then do the exact same thing. So replicate that. That's how detailed that section is supposed to be. Results will report on what you find, okay? But it will just do that. So it will just show what you have found, whereas your discussion section will try and interpret those results or try and explain them, okay? In your discussion section, you'll also come back to your initial questions that you asked in the introduction, or that you set out to answer with your research study. Okay, so we'll get into those in more detail a bit later, but just to give you a quick rundown. So this is the research report, and this is the one with the extra sections. Okay.
Hi,
Right.
Nicole. How are you? This is
Hi.
Maha.
Hi, well, and you?
Good. Yeah. Sorry for interrupting you. We'll keep continuing the class.
Sorry, just say again.
Yeah, we will continue the class. Nice to talk to you. Nice chatting with you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. You're welcome. It's good to see you. It's good to see some faces. It's always a bit difficult with the online things, where you can't see people. So yeah, lovely to meet you. Right, so moving on, research by reading. So this one is a little bit different. This is where you conduct research by reading basically other research, academic literature, or reliable sources. And the structure is a little bit different. So here you'll have a structure that's a bit closer to an essay. So you'll have your introduction, your body, and your conclusion, and then you'll have your recommendations if that's relevant. It might not always. But the body section here will also be structured into some subheadings. And here you'll have to really analyze that assessment brief and make sure you understand what sections you need to put in there, or what specifically you need to do to report on. And most times they will tell you explicitly, you need to focus on A, B, and C, or you need to do specific research on these concepts, or yeah, so they'll stipulate that very explicitly. And then you will include these sections in your body section. Remember, just as a note, we never call this section the body. Okay, that's just an informal word that we use to refer to that section in the report, but we'll never call it body. We'll never use body as a subheading. So your subheadings will introduce the different things that you need to focus on. Right. And then your evaluative report will have a similar structure. Again, you will divide that body section into relevant subheadings. It might be that you have to do a bit of theory, so explaining the theory behind the research you're reporting on, your observation, and then some sort of evaluation or critique or interpretation of what you found. Okay. Again, you'll have your conclusion and recommendations like you always would. All right, so the common things, features, I'll go through some of those. So all reports have information presented in sections, and sections all have their headings, and each section serves a specific purpose. Now, what makes this different from an essay? With an essay, usually you have to put forward some sort of argument, and you have to create nice flow throughout. Whereas with a report, the sections are a bit more standalone. So each section is supposed to discuss one thing and has a very specific purpose. So it might feel like you don't have this the similar type of flow that you would have with an essay, where you have to create an argument and support that argument throughout. The report is basically just that. You are reporting on something that you found, or something that you've researched, or something that you evaluated. So it's a bit more rigid. It's a bit more separated. The sections are more separated, if that makes sense. All right, so some more common features. Numbering systems, especially because reports have different sections and because they can be a bit longer, we need to number those sections with a sensible numbering system. We will often include figures and tables, and they are, obviously also need to be numbered and be labeled. But maybe just, if I can just stand still there for a moment, what's really important with tables and figures, people like to include them in reports, and they should. It's a good tool to use. But when you're writing a report and you want to include some sort of visual element, like a figure or a table or a chart of some sort, it's really important for you to ask yourself what you want to convey with this figure that you're putting in your report. The purpose of a visual aid is to communicate information in a way that's quick and that is very explicit. So at a glance, your reader is supposed to be able to see what it is that you're trying to communicate. And it's supposed to be easier for your reader to interpret the information if you put it in a visual. So when you are using these, or if you want to use a visual element, just maybe pause for a moment and think if it's the best way to do it, and choose the appropriate visual aid to do that. Obviously, bar graphs and pie charts and line graphs are better in different situations. So think about what it is that you want to represent and what type of graph best represents that, or what type of visual best represents that. Right, then most reports obviously want to get to that recommendation at the end. So they want to get to a point where they can basically have an opinion about the results and then give a recommendation. And then the writing is obviously very concise, precise, factual, and well supported. Right, so in terms of structure, we'll maybe just look at the abstract. So a report, regardless of the type of report, you will have an abstract there, or sometimes they call it an executive summary. And I will go into a bit more detail about the summary in just a minute. But it always comes at the beginning of the report, before the table of contents, and it's usually just a paragraph long, and it's on a separate page, so it's separate from the rest of your report. It's just a summary that summarizes basically your entire report. And like I said, with tables and figures, you always need a number and a title, and you always need to mention it in the body of the text as well. So you can't just plonk a table in there and accept that the reader will know what it's about. You need to discuss it in your text before you actually put in the visuals. So that explanation needs to be before your table or your figure. Right. Some more general rules. So in terms of the reference list, obviously you start on a separate page. That's not something new. That's something we always do with essays as well. Right, and then I didn't include any information on references because like we saw also with the essay writing, people have different levels of expertise with references. If you want me to explain a bit more about references, I'm happy to do that. Just stop me or ask me, yes, I'd like to know some more about this, and then I can do that. If not, and if you guys are well versed in referencing, then I can move on. So I'll just give a second there, maybe some pause just for you to think about that and to comment if you want to.
Just a quick question, Nicole.
Yeah.
Reference list, does that have to be double spaced as well, like the rest of your essay or report? Because I've never double spaced it, but I've seen other people do, and I don't know if there's a certain rule.
Yes, so it will depend on what formatting style they want you to use. If I'm not mistaken, most of the time they'll ask you to use the APA formatting style as well as APA referencing, because you use referencing, but there's a specific formatting style for APA as well. And I can show you where to find that on the internet. And in there, I think they specify exactly what your reference list is supposed to look like in terms of spacing as well. And I believe you're right. I don't think there's double spacing in the reference list, but we can double check that. As far as I remember, they do the indent still, but they won't have double spacing. But just if I forget, just remind me after we're done. I'll quickly show you to find that on the internet, and we can double. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions regarding referencing, or do you want me to go into more detail about that? You fairly okay with it? Referencing in two places always? Okay. Somebody says yes, please. Okay. Is there anything specific that you want me to talk about in terms of referencing?
Like this is my first semester in SEO, so I just want to know what are the expectation in SEO. I keep reading all your directions, but if you give me a short a brief summary about referencing, it would be very easy for me. Thank you.
Okay, sure. I'll talk you through the referencing guide, and I'll show you where to find all the information that you'll need. But the basics of referencing is just that we always reference in two places. So we have our in-text reference that's in our text where we flag or we say, this is not my idea, this is somebody else's idea. So that's within your text, and it's the short reference. You'll just have the surname and the date. And sometimes when it's applicable, also the page number. And then at the back, you'll have your reference list, which will be the same references, but it will be all the information you need to find that source that you referred to in your text. So with references, when you reference an expert or some literature that you found, we always do it in two places, in our text and in our reference list. And there's a specific way of doing that. And that specific way is called a referencing style. The two most common ones at SCU are the APA referencing style and the Harvard referencing style. They're very similar, but there will be certain differences. And those will just be, generally you need the same information, but it will be presented a little bit differently. So there will be commas in different places and there will be full stops in different places in terms of your reference list entry. But I will give you a quick show and tell after the presentation when I navigate to the website. Is that okay? Okay, right. So in terms of an appendix, sometimes with reports, we want to include appendices. So that will come after your reference list. So it's after the fact. And if you have different ones, you need to number them as well. An example of something that you would put in an appendix is, for example, a questionnaire. If you were supposed to do a reference, a research report, and you used questionnaires to gather information or to gather data, you would typically put that questionnaire in an appendix because people might want to see that. And remember, they need to be able to replicate your research, right? So they need to know everything that you did. And you would want to include that, in other words, but you can't put that in the body of your text. It would be too long. So that's typically something that you might want to put in an appendix. All right, but there will be other things as well that might belong there. No, an appendix, I'm just reading in the chat, an appendix is not mandatory. You will only have an appendix in there if it makes sense if you have additional documents or information that you need to communicate to the reader, but that you can't put in the text because of it being too long or it not being relevant within the text. So then you'll put it at the back. But it's not something that's mandatory. It's something that will be, it will depend on your report and what it is. Okay, in terms of some more general rules, page numbers, we always start after the table of contents when we're doing page numbers, just like in a book. And then, like I said, you always need to check your task description and your marking rubric to get you that specific requirements, like, for example, the formatting style that we've been discussing and the required sections that you need to include. I need to take a break. Any questions, any comments so far? Everybody okay? Right. Okay, so writing the abstract, if you've never done a report before, the abstract might be a bit daunting, but it doesn't have to be. It's basically just a summary. So it just provides a very succinct but a very complete overview of your entire report. So it's typically the main gist of your report. What the topic was, what you researched, what the results were, and the recommendation or the conclusion you could draw from that. So that's basically what's in there. It's 1 to 2 paragraphs. It's always before your table of contents. You can include a summary sentence for each section of your report. That might be a good way to make sure you have everything in there. And normally people write this last. And the reason for that is obviously you need to include your recommendations, and you need to include what you found after you've analyzed the data. So you won't be able to start with an executive summary or an abstract because you wouldn't have done the report yet. So we always write that last or at the end. So the following things should be clear in your abstract: the aim or the purpose of your report or the research that you did, your main issue or your main topics, your procedure or your method or your analytical process. So that will depend. You won't obviously put in your entire methodology, but you will say, I followed this methodology, or just shortly state what it was that you did, how you gathered data and analyzed it. Then you'll have your results or your findings, and lastly, your recommendations. So all of that needs to go into your abstract or your executive summary. And if you think about it, putting all of that into 2 paragraphs, it needs to be really short and really succinct. So you need to be able to say, take out just the most important things and include that in 2 paragraphs. Okay, then sometimes students trip up a little bit with these 2 sections. So they'll have a results section and your discussion section. And I think the reason why this is maybe a little bit difficult for students is because we are, it's maybe part of human nature to try and explain immediately why we got the results that we got. So people often in their results section want to explain or discuss or interpret the results already. And it's a bit difficult. You need to clearly keep the two separate in your mind. The results section is very descriptive. You're just describing, you're saying, this is what I found. You'll include tables and graphs here. If, for example, you did a questionnaire or interviews, you might have a bar graph showing how they compared, or showing, you know, the results of your of the experiment that you did. But that is the only thing it'll do. It will only show. Okay. You'll highlight the key things, you'll show the evidence, and you'll present it in a way that's really clear. But you won't analyze or interpret it yet. So that's just a descriptive section that just shows the results, and then only you'll get to your discussion or your interpretation section, which is a totally different section, or the next section in your report. And here you're going to refer back to those findings or those results. You're going to analyze it, but also in this section, you're going to bring that back to your aims that you set out to do in the beginning. So when you attempt a research project, or when you start off, you have your aims that you want to reach in your with the research. And in your discussion section, you're going to bring that back to your initial aims. So you're going to say, I wanted to know this. This is the result I got. This result means this. So you analyze it, and therefore it shows that, and then you answer your question. So here you tie it back to your research questions or your aims that you set out in the beginning. Right. You will refer to other literature here in this section. Why? Because it will be part of your analysis. You have to draw conclusions, but in order for you to draw these conclusions, you need to refer to other research. You might say, well, in this study, these guys also found the same thing, therefore I can confirm my result, or I can confirm that the result means this. Or you could say other results show that students who answer the question like this obviously has this problem, and then link it back to your aim. So this section is going to be very supported by other evidence or by other research, whereas your results section, you're not going to refer to other people because you're just representing what you found, or you're just showing what you found. Okay, recommendations are usually a call to action. So it's basically, it goes a little bit further. Sometimes I try to explain it in the following way. When we do research, we usually have a real world problem that we want to solve. That's why we do research. And then we have a research problem. So ultimately we want to solve a real world issue. But in order to do that, we have to do very specific research. And in that specific research, we're going to have specific research aim that we're trying to prove with an experiment or with a study. But the research question is related obviously to the real world problem, but it is not the real world problem. Okay, so we do research to get closer to a solution, usually for a real world problem. And recommendations, so after we've done our analysis showing how we answered our research question, we pull it back to a recommendation that speaks to our real world issue. So that is where these calls to action comes in. This is where recommendations for further research comes in. This is where recommendations come in that will affect the real world issue. Does that make sense to everybody, or am I losing you guys? Are you okay with that explanation? These things can sometimes be a bit abstract if you don't have concrete examples in front of you. Yes, I'm fine. Okay, so they'll have suggestions for further research. and other suggestions for improvement, like in the workplace or farming techniques or strategies to improve behaviors. So do you see here what I mean with the real world issues that you try to solve? So say, for example, let's take the middle one, farming techniques. There might be an issue that farmers are experiencing. Now you do research, you do a test of, say, for example, you're in chemistry and you do some sort of test. You test a specific type of fertilizer, or you test a specific type of whatever seed that they might use. So do you see the real world issue, this farming issue? You're testing a small thing in your research, okay? But now you're bringing it back. So I tested this specific type of fertilizer in my research and it worked well here. Therefore, my recommendation would be for farmers to use this fertilizer when they experience this issue. Do you see how recommendations bring it back to the real world issue? That's what you're supposed to do in your recommendations section. Okay, and then the last one there is just be clear and direct when writing your recommendations. You're asking, you need guidance to improve behavior management in real-time classrooms. Okay, I can't really go into a discussion about that right now. It's not my field of expertise. I'm not in education, so I won't be able to comment on that. Sorry. Right, so I think this is basically what we wanted to cover today in terms of report writing. Does anybody have any questions on this? If not, I can step away and show you the referencing and the formatting resources. Any questions? You okay? Yep. Okay, good. Okay, just give me a second. I'm just going to stop sharing now and just navigate to the correct page, and then I can share again.
Nicole, sorry for interrupting. Nicole, so you said we can include the graph, pie chart, is it like we have to, or we can, or
no, you definitely don't have to, but you can, and you should always ask yourself, will this enhance my report? So will it make it easier for my reader to get what I'm saying? If so, then you can include a graphic or a figure or a table. Sometimes there's like a process that you want to show that's a lot easier to understand if it's represented visually, but it's definitely not something that you have to do. Okay.
like is it like it has to be accurate or like approximate one? Can I explain my ideas using a graph, like the information with the information, what I hear and what I read, but it wouldn't be exactly the same same readings or same data, like, you know what I mean? Are you able to come to my point? Are you able to follow me?
I think what you mean is that sometimes, especially when we are in a specific field and we work in a specific field, we have some inclinations of what happens in certain situations. It's called anecdotal evidence. So you don't have any hard evidence for it. It's just, for example, I'm a learning advisor, so I see a lot of students and help them with their assessments and things. And I normally see students struggle with, for example, referencing, but that's just anecdotal. That's just anecdotal evidence. So I can't, for me to make that statement, I need to go and check the results. So I need to go and see, say, for example, of the 50 students I saw this month, 25 wanted to talk about referencing. Therefore, I can legitimately say 50% of students struggle with that. I probably knew that beforehand, but it's just anecdotal. It's just a feeling. It's just my experience, but it's not hard data that I can back up. So is that what you're saying? That sometimes you experience something, but you read something else?
exactly. Like you're answering my question exactly. But like what I'm asking you is like if I am presenting some data or some chart, so is that have to be accurate or
Yes, so I would not present a graph or a chart or anything like that on anecdotal data or anecdotal evidence. You might mention that and say, well, anecdotally, this is what I experienced, but the actual data or the research or the literature says this. And you would only include a graph or a table or a figure or a chart or whatever on actual data that was proven or that was scientifically researched.
beautiful? Thank you.
Okay, sure. All right. So in terms of the referencing and the formatting, I will show you, we can navigate to the library's web page. And then if you scroll down here, is there a way to close this? No, thanks. Right, so if you scroll down, we can enter the APA referencing guide, which I'll get to just now. Oh, no, sorry, it's in the same place. So if I click on the APA referencing guide, there's in this section, example, formatted and instruction and structure, you can click on how to order, structure, and format a paper. And this will give you all the details about formatting. So as far as I can remember, the question was about line spacing. So it says here, yeah, general double space for all parts of the paper, including the abstract, text, block quotations, tables, figures, and the reference list, including between and within entries. Okay. Do not add extra space before or after paragraphs. Does that answer your question earlier? Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay. Right. So it seems, yes, you have to include that. But if you need to know anything about formatting your paper, you can navigate to this section. It explains everything you need to know about font, title, and usually when they ask you to complete a report, they will say, please use the APA formatting style or the APA referencing and formatting style. So that means you need to use obviously the APA referencing style, but you also need to follow the formatting rules for APA, which
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. In terms of referencing, like I said, you always reference in two places. And depending on what you're referencing, the entry might look a little bit different. So let's go with a journal article. It's something that you might use quite often. If you're referencing a journal article, your in-text reference will look like this. So you'll have your author's surname and the date. And then you will have either your quotation or your paraphrase of what that source said. And then in your reference list, you will have all the information that they need. So you'll have your surname initial, the date, the title of the article. Then you'll have the title of the journal in italics, comma. These numbers refer to the volume, the number of the journal and the volume of the journal, okay? And these are the page numbers that the article appeared on. And then lastly, you'll have your DOI or your web address to find that article. Right, so referencing is just about basically understanding the recipe book, and this is your recipe book. If you've got your recipe book, you can look up any type of reference, so books, conferences, anything. There is even some sections on figures and how to reference those, interviews, anything that you need to reference, you can find here. And basically what you do is just you click on the relevant type of source and you follow the recipe, you follow the pattern to include the information. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you wanted to know in terms of the basics, or
Exactly. You answered all my question. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Any other questions I can help you guys with, or do you want to know burning questions?
Nicole, when can I expect my assignment 1 result?
I have no idea. You'll have to ask your UA about that. Usually they will tell you when they'll be done marking.
Okay.
Okay, I've never used it before. Yeah, so you're asking, Rose, you're asking about our law referencing. I've written in Harvard style before. Can I ask how can make an in-text citation? Okay, yeah. So for law, law is a different ball game. The law guys do things a bit differently. So with law, they your in-text reference is basically a footnote. So it's very different from what we used to with the APA or the Harvard. But in the same way, you can go to the referencing style in the library's website, read up on the general rules. But let's just take a look at journal articles. So here they will show you basically your, just need to navigate to the correct one now. See if I can find one that'll show that. Rule 5. Okay. This is interesting. Yeah. So you'll just have your indicator, your footnote indicator in your text. Okay. And then in your footnote, you need to put this, the author, article, journal. So the information goes in your footnote, and you won't have that in-text reference, the surname and the date that we normally have in APA. Yeah, does that make sense?
Sorry, could you repeat again? I'm so sorry.
Sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Could you repeat that again?
Could I
Repeat?
repeat that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so with in-text referencing for law, you will not have the in-text where you have the author and the date in your text. You will only have a footnote, so a small number 1 or a small number 2. And then in your full footnote, where you explain what that footnote's referring to, you will have the information listed.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. I've understood it.
Yeah, does that make sense? Okay. It can be a bit difficult to get your head around the law referencing if you're used to APA, but it's basically the same thing. It's just presented differently. So the style is just different, but the principles are the same. You still need to reference. Yeah, so the principles are the same. It's just the way they do it is a bit different. Yeah. Anything else?
I remember doing referencing in Harvard, in the Harvard style. And back then when I did my studies, SCU used to have a abridged version of like SCU peculiar rules. Do they still have that? Or?
Yeah, so that's why we recommend that students use the university's library webpage to navigate to the referencing styles, just to make sure that you adhere to some of those more particular rules that they might have or they might change sometimes. Yeah, most institutions will have a bit of a tweak. So it's always good to just make sure you're using the official guides. And if you make use of software things like EndNote or yeah, there are various tools out there to help you to reference. I always tell students it's good just to double check to make sure that whatever that software is basically giving back or putting out there, just to make sure it is in fact correct according to your institution's style.
That was going to be my second question. How does that fit in with EndNote? Because I've never downloaded EndNote and I've always done the referencing manually, which I kind of got used to. And yeah, it was after you get used to it, I think it's yeah, I mean, it's no problem.
Yeah, it does take a bit of getting used to. EndNote is useful for longer things, like for example, you're doing your dissertation or you're doing a thesis and you've got like pages full of references. That's useful for that, because EndNote basically creates a bit of a almost a bit of a database for you. So you insert your articles there, and you have you put all the information in once, and then when as you're writing, you reference to that same article, it will populate it for you and it will help you with the reference list. But if you're just doing a shorter report or an essay, it's sometimes just more confusing to work with EndNote, or more time consuming to put in all the articles in EndNote. But if you're in the same field and you're going to keep using it, and you're going to do some postgrad studies and have longer assessments or like a thesis to write, definitely worth it. But it depends on different people. Some people don't like using EndNote. If it's something you want to explore, though, a good idea would be to keep an eye on the library's page. They do EndNote specific training.
Yes, I've been to a few.
Yeah, so they can help with that.
Yes.
But it's good to, yeah, I always recommend that students just double check with the institution's guide. And the reason for that also is postgrad, and maybe later you'd like to publish some of your research in journals. Very often journals also have their very specific style guide that you have to follow. So they'll generally sort of follow APA or Harvard or whatever, but they'll have their tweaks. So it's good to get used to sort of double checking the specific style for your institution, or for the journal that you're submitting research to. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That's great. And I know this is not an EndNote session. Can I just quickly ask, like, once you lose your SCU login, so you can't log into EndNote anymore, right? Like, how does that work?
I am not 100% sure. It will depend on where your EndNote license is coming from. Is that not part of your Microsoft suite? If it is,
It
and
would
you've
have
got a
been.
Microsoft account, you should be able to still access that. But I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I can't help you with that. It will depend on where that license is coming from.
Just to add to that, I've been able to like use EndNote on my own computer, like you download it from the library site, and I can still add and use it, add references and use it without an SCU login.
Then it might be freeware that's available, or like I said, might be part of your Microsoft license. I don't know if you've got Microsoft on your personal computer, but it might be that it comes with that.
Yeah,
I'm
and librarians are really happy to answer any of your questions. That kind of thing. Yeah,
they're great with that. Yeah,
sure. Thank you. Sorry.
No, you're more than welcome. I'm sorry, I can't give you more information. It's not my field of expertise, unfortunately. Anything else? We've still got 10 minutes, so if you have any questions, now's the time. Okay, I think that might be it then.
Yes, thank you very much. This is really good, solid information.
Yeah.
Can we have it more often, Alison?
Yeah, sure.
Every 6 months or something, every 3
Of
months.
course.
It's a
Um,
good refresher.
Probably not till next year, but yeah, I'll be keeping in touch with Nicole and we'll run these again next year. Yeah. But meanwhile, you know, like ask your librarians, that as postgrads, you actually have you're able to have a one-on-one consultation with a librarian. And like if you're curious about EndNote or how to use the library databases, all that, they're happy to spend some time with you and help you out. So that's a good thing about being a postgrad. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yes, thank you.
just have to ask. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, we might finish up. Thanks very much, Nicole. It's really helpful. And thanks for everyone for attending.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Alison.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Nicole.
All right, Alison. Speak to you
See ya.
soon. I'll get those slides to you. I haven't forgotten. I just haven't got.
Okay. Yep, no worries.
All right. See ya.